High upon a rugged cliff, where waves crash endlessly against the rocks below, there stood a fortress cloaked in shadows, an ancient castle whose name was spoken with fear in every village for miles. Locals whispered of its terrible secret, for when the sun set and the world grew silent, the castle seemed to come alive. From its towering battlements, flames would rise like a dragon's breath, painting the night sky in fire. To some, it was a curse born of betrayal centuries ago. To others, it was proof that the spirit of a dragon still haunted the stones. But beyond the legends, there were always those who sought the truth. Travelers, adventurers, and the curious found themselves drawn to the castle's mystery, wondering if the fire was real or if it was nothing more than trickery hidden within the ancient walls. Was it the breath of a forgotten beast, or the work of human hands determined to keep the legend alive? On one such night, as the moon rose high and the wind howled across the cliff, a new group of outsiders would enter the castle gates. Their footsteps echoed in the great hall, their hearts racing with both fear and fascination. They came seeking answers, but what they would discover inside those firelit walls would shake them to their core. For the castle did not only breathe fire at night, it held secrets, dangers, and a truth more terrifying than legend. Chapter 1. The Aravolth road to the castle twisted like a serpent through the wild countryside. Ancient oaks lined the path, their branches reaching overhead as though trying to block the way, while crows cawed from the treetops in grim welcome. The evening mist curled low across the ground, and every so often the travellers caught sight of the sea below, restless and roaring as it crashed against the black cliffs. Thomas Hargreaves tightened his coat against the cold wind and glanced up at the looming silhouette ahead. "There it is," he murmured, pointing. "The castle of Blackthorn." The others in the carriage followed his gaze. The fortress rose from the cliff edge like a crown of stone, its towers jagged against the dying light of day. From a distance, it seemed lifeless, abandoned, but the locals they had passed on the road had spoken differently. "They say it breathes fire," whispered Clara, her voice unsteady, though tinged with excitement. She was younger than the rest, her eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and fear. Thomas allowed himself a small smile. "Legends, Clara, stories to frighten children, and yet," interrupted Mr. Whitcomb, the scholar of the group, "these tales are older than the stones themselves. Villagers have recorded sightings of flames for centuries. Legends have a way of clinging to truth, however exaggerated." The carriage rattled through the iron gates, rusted, but still standing tall. The driver, a grizzled man from the nearest village, refused to go farther. "I'll leave you here," he muttered. "I'll return at dawn. But mark my words, stay indoors when the night comes. The castle has its own life after sunset." His warning lingered in the air long after the carriage pulled away. Inside the courtyard, silence reigned. The castle's stones were dark, weathered by storms, and ivy clung to its walls like green scars. Windows glimmered faintly in the fading light. Though none had admitted to keeping torches lit, the heavy wooden doors groaned as Thomas pushed them open. The great hall was vast and echoing, lined with banners faded to colourless shreds. Dust swirled in the torchlight as though the very air had grown weary of waiting. Their footsteps clattered across the flagstones, magnified in the emptiness. "It feels..." Clara hesitated, watched. Indeed, the portraits on the walls seemed to follow them, stern faces of knights, lords, and ladies long dead, their painted eyes fixed with suspicion. Mr. Whitcomb lit a lantern and raised it high. "Observe the architecture. 15th century stonework, though the foundations are far older. This castle has seen war, betrayal, perhaps even treachery. Such places never forget their past." As they explored the first chambers, they found relics of lives once lived, a broken goblet on a mantel, a rusted sword leaning against a wall, and an old suit of armor standing guard in silence. Time had hollowed the place, but it still carried a strange vitality, as though ready to awaken at any moment. From beyond the windows, the sea roared louder, and the wind carried the faint smell of smoke. Clara froze. "Do you smell that? Smoke like something burning." Thomas frowned and moved to the window. The horizon was fading into dusk, the first stars pricking through. And then, faint but certain, he saw it, a thread of orange rising from one of the outer towers, curling into the twilight sky. Mr. Wickham joined him, his scholarly calm faltering. "It begins already. The fire," Clara gasped, clutching her cloak tighter. "But how? The castle has no fires lit, no servants, no hearths." Thomas turned from the window, his face pale but determined. "Then we shall discover who lights it." Legends do not burn of their own accord. As darkness deepened and the sound of crackling echoed faintly through the stone walls, the travellers gathered in the hall, the glow of their lanterns trembling. Above them, the castle groaned as though taking a breath, preparing to exhale flame into the night. For centuries, villagers had whispered of Blackthorn Castle, the fortress that breathed fire. Tonight, the travellers would witness it themselves. Whether curse or cunning, they had entered the heart of a mystery that would not easily let them go. And as the first flames lit against the sky, the castle seemed almost alive, its towers pulsing with light, its windows glowing like eyes, its breath fiery as any dragon from the stories of old. Chapter 2. The first forever night came swiftly to Blackthorn Castle. The last embers of sunset bled into darkness, and the sea below churned like molten steel under the moonlight. Inside the great hall, the travellers had gathered around a single lantern, their faces half lit, half shadowed, waiting for the legend to reveal itself. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional groan of the castle timbers or the rattling of shutters against the wind. Then, faintly at first, it came a low rumble, as though the earth itself was stirring. Clara clutched Thomas's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Before he could answer, the sound grew louder, a deep, resonant growl that rolled through the stone like distant thunder. The flames arrived next. From the tallest tower, at the castle's northern end, a jet of orange light burst forth, scattering sparks into the night sky. A roar followed, not natural, not entirely mechanical, but something that seemed alive. The tower glowed as though its stones themselves were aflame, smoke curling upward in twisting plumes. "My God," Hastings muttered, "it truly does breathe fire." Mr. Wickham's scholar's calm cracked. "Not fire as in hearths or torches, this is something different, something engineered. Listen, the hiss, the metallic groan. It is not the breath of dragons, but of machines." Clara shook her head, unable to look away. "But why? Who would build such a thing?" The castle shuddered as a second burst of flame shot up from another turret. The light painted the sky crimson, reflecting in the black sea below. The courtyard filled with smoke, and for a moment it seemed as if the fortress were alive, exhaling great fiery breaths like a beast awakened from slumber. Thomas's jaw tightened. Legends don't matter now. What matters is that someone is here, feeding this fire, exploring. The Sorcerers group armed themselves with lanterns and, hesitantly, with the old swords they had found in the hall. They crossed the courtyard cautiously, the cobblestones glowing faintly from the reflected blaze above. Every corner seemed alive with shadows, every gust of wind carrying sparks that hissed and died in the damp night air. They reached the northern tower, the one that had breathed the first fire. Its door stood ajar, smoke drifting lazily from the gap. Inside, the air was heavy with heat. The walls glowed faintly, pulsing with an inner light. Mr. Wickham bent to examine the floor, brushing aside ash. "Coal dust," he murmured. "Fresh. Someone has been here recently." Thomas raised the lantern higher. Stairs spiraled upward, their stones blackened and warm to the touch. "Up we go," he said firmly, though his voice betrayed a flicker of unease. Clara followed reluctantly, her eyes darting at every sound. "It feels wrong, as if the castle itself is awake and watching us." The stairs led to a chamber near the tower's peak. Here they found the source, a massive iron furnace built into the wall, pipes and bellows stretching upward into the stone. Coal glowed red-hot inside, flames licking the edges as though eager to escape. Every few minutes, the bellows engaged with a hiss, forcing air through the chamber and driving the flames out through the tower's mouth. "It is a machine," Wickham breathed in awe. "A monstrous invention, designed to mimic the breath of dragons." Clara shuddered. "But who built it?" And why keep it hidden all these centuries? Thomas studied the furnace, his eyes narrowing. This is not ancient. The stone may be old, yes, but the ironwork it's been maintained. Someone has been tending this fire. A warning in the dark before they could examine further. Footsteps echoed from below. Heavy, deliberate. The group froze. Quickly hide the lantern, Thomas hissed. They extinguished the light, plunging the chamber into darkness, save for the furnace's hellish glow. The footsteps grew louder, climbing the stairs with steady rhythm. A figure appeared in the doorway. Cloaked in shadow, the intruder moved directly to the furnace, stirring the coals with a long iron rod. Sparks flared, and with a hiss, the furnace roared again, belching flame through the tower's mouth into the night. The figure muttered to himself, words half swallowed by the roar. They must believe. They must fear. Clara gasped softly, and the figure froze. Slowly, he turned, the firelight illuminating the edge of his hooded face. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, as if sensing their presence, the figure dropped the iron rod and fled down the stairs, after him. Thomas shouted. They gave chase, their footsteps pounding against the stone. But the intruder was swift, vanishing into the labyrinth of corridors before they could catch him. Only the echo of his boots and the lingering scent of smoke remained. The aftermath back in the great hall, the group gathered, shaken but resolute. The flames from the tower continued to light the night, casting their shadows long across the floor. So, Thomas said grimly, the castle does not breathe fire on its own. Someone breathes it for it. Clara's voice trembled. But who? And for what purpose? Whitcomb's eyes glimmered with troubled fascination. To inspire terror, perhaps. To preserve the legend. If the villagers believe the castle still lives, still burns, none will dare approach. It would be the perfect way to guard secrets within these walls. Thomas nodded. Then we must uncover those secrets. Whoever tends that fire is hiding more than machinery outside. Another burst of flame lit the night, brighter than before, as though the castle itself were answering their resolve. The castle of Blackthorn had revealed its first truth, that its fire was no legend, but a deliberate deception. Yet with that revelation came greater danger. For now they knew someone was within the walls, feeding the furnace, guarding a secret worth cloaking in fire. And as they lay sleepless in their chambers that night, listening to the roar of the furnace and the hiss of flames, one thought haunted them all. The castle was alive not with curse or beast, but with human will. And human will, they knew, could be far more dangerous than legend. Chapter 3. Secrets in the Stoneth morning, after the flames had first roared from Blackthorn's towers, dawned grey and bitterly cold. Mist clung to the cliffs, curling around the battlements like pale fingers, and the sea crashed endlessly against the rocks below. Inside the castle, the travellers were bleary-eyed from lack of sleep. The furnace's hiss and the periodic bursts of fire had echoed all through the night, reminding them that they were not alone within these walls. Thomas Hargreaves stood at the long dining table, examining the remnants of an old map he had discovered rolled into a niche of the great hall. The castle is riddled with passages, he said, running a finger across the faded ink. Hidden stairways, chambers, tunnels beneath the cliffs. Whoever tends that fire could vanish into them with ease. Mr. Whitcomb, spectacles perched precariously on his nose, peered at the parchment with scholarly interest. Remarkable. Blackthorn was not only a fortress, it was a labyrinth. Its builders were men who feared betrayal, who expected siege. Secrets were as much a part of its design as stone and mortar. Clara sat near the hearth, clutching a blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide, dark with unease. So it isn't just the fire. The whole castle is alive with secrets. Every shadow feels like it's watching us. Thomas forced a reassuring smile. We'll find the truth, Clara. Legends are only as strong as the lies that keep them breathing. The library decided to search the castle methodically, starting with the library, a vast, dust-shrouded chamber lined with shelves of crumbling books and scrolls. The air was thick with the smell of parchment and mildew. Shafts of weak daylight streamed through high windows, illuminating the drifting motes of dust Whitcomb's eyes gleamed with excitement as he ran his hands reverently across the spines of ancient volumes, histories, treatises, journals. "This is a treasure trove." Thomas lifted a heavy tome from a desk. Its cover was cracked, its binding frayed. Inside, the ink had faded, but the words were still legible. "The Fire of Blackthorn." An account, he read aloud. "In the year of our Lord 1572, Lord Alaric of Blackthorn sought dominion through the mastery of flame. He employed alchemists and artificers to build machines that might mimic the dragons of legend, that his enemies might tremble before the fire of his house." Whitcomb clapped his hands together. "Just as I suspected. Not superstition science, primitive, dangerous science, but science nonetheless. This castle was the birthplace of an invention meant to terrify." Clara shivered. "And someone now has revived it." The alchemist's diary on another shelf. Clara discovered a small leather-bound book, its edges singed. She brought it carefully to the table, where Whitcomb and Thomas bent over it. The script inside was hurried, almost frantic. "The Lord demands more fire, more spectacle. The machines groan with strain. The pipes leak with heat, yet still he presses. I fear the furnaces will one day consume the castle itself. We have awakened something we cannot control." Thomas frowned. "So even then, the builders knew it was dangerous." Whitcomb nodded gravely. Alaric's ambition was insatiable. He wanted the world to think dragons lived within his walls. But in truth, he was only a man stoking a furnace. Clara's hand trembled as she turned the page. "We sealed the lower chambers. The fire must never be used again. If the castle breathes flame, it will breathe ruin." The last entry was unfinished, the ink smudged. It ended with 2 words. "It begins." The silence that followed was heavy. Hidden chamber Slater, that afternoon, guided by the old map, the group ventured into a corridor that sloped downward, deeper into the belly of the fortress. The air grew damp and cool, and the stone walls glistened with moisture. Their lanterns revealed carvings along the passage, strange symbols of dragons, fire, and eyes that seemed to follow them. Clara whispered, "This place feels cursed." "Not cursed," Whitcomb corrected, though his voice was strained. "Designed to impress fear. Fear is a stronger weapon as steel." At the passage's end, they discovered a heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. Thomas heaved it open with effort, and the hinges shrieked in protest. Beyond lay a chamber unlike any they had seen. Stone benches, broken vials, the remnants of furnaces and bellows now long extinguished. The walls were scorched black, as though the very stone had burnt. "This is where it began," Whitcomb murmured. "The laboratory of the artificers." Among the ashes, Clara stooped and picked up a twisted piece of metal, a cog, still faintly warm to the touch. Thomas's brow furrowed. "Warm, but this place hasn't been used in centuries." Whitcomb's expression darkened. "Unless someone has been here recently, searching, rebuilding." The intruder returned this. They examined the chamber. A faint noise reached their ears, the scrape of stone against stone. Thomas raised a hand for silence. The sound came again, from the far wall. He lifted his lantern and saw it, a section of the wall slowly swinging open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. A figure emerged, cloaked and hooded, carrying a satchel. For a heartbeat, the intruder froze, lantern-light catching the sharp glint of eyes. Then, with startling speed, he hurled a vial to the floor. It shattered, releasing a plume of smoke that filled the chamber. "Stop him!" Thomas shouted, coughing, but the figure darted through the passage, vanishing into the maze beyond. By the time the smoke cleared, he was gone, leaving only the echo of footsteps and the acrid tang of chemicals in the air. Clara coughed, her face pale. He was here, working in this very place, keeping the fire alive. Thomas's jaw tightened, and hiding something even more dangerous, the warning in stone before leaving the chamber. Whitcomb noticed something carved deeply into the wall, half hidden by soot, a warning in Latin. He translated slowly, his voice heavy. "He who breathes fire will one day be consumed by it." The words chilled them all. As they climbed back toward the surface, the castle seemed to groan around them, as though mocking their discovery. Outside, The sea crashed, and the wind carried the faint smell of smoke once more. The intruder was still out there, tending the furnaces, reviving a power that should have remained buried in the stone. And as night approached, they knew the fire would breathe again stronger, fiercer, and perhaps aimed not just at the sky, but at them. Chapter 4. The midnight intruder's second night at Blackthorn Castle descended with a heaviness that pressed on the travellers like a physical weight. The discoveries in the scorched laboratory haunted their thoughts: the alchemist's diary, the hidden passages, the intruder who had escaped in a plume of smoke. Each step echoed with unease. Each gust of wind through the battlements whispered like voices from the past. In the great hall, the group gathered once more. A storm raged outside, battering the windows and hurling spray from the cliffs. Lightning flashed, illuminating the stern portraits of lords and ladies on the walls, their painted eyes glimmering, as though alive. Thomas Hargreaves stood at the long table, gripping the map of secret passages they had found. "He will return," he said firmly. "The intruder tends those fires like a priest at an altar. Tonight, we will be ready." Clara's eyes widened with fear. "But what if he is dangerous? What if he means to harm us?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "He already has. Clara Vane is dead, and he nearly filled us with poison smoke. We cannot leave him to his devices. If we are to survive, we must uncover the truth of what he protects." Whitcomb adjusted his spectacles, nodding grimly. "I agree. Legends are powerful, but so too are men who manipulate them. If this intruder continues, he could turn the fire upon the villages or upon us." The plan was simple. They would divide the castle's watch. Thomas and Whitcomb would guard the northern tower, where the furnace roared most fiercely. Clara, despite her protests, would remain in the hall with the lanterns, keeping eyes on the courtyard. The fire rekindled near midnight. The low rumble began again, echoing through the stones. The walls vibrated faintly, dust drifting from the rafters. Then came the hiss of air through bellows, the groan of metal straining, and finally, the eruption. A jet of fire burst from the tower's mouth, roaring into the storm-tossed sky. Thomas pressed a finger to his lips and motioned for Whitcomb to follow. Lanterns dimmed. They crept up the spiral staircase of the northern tower. Heat radiated through the stones, intensifying with each step. At the top, the furnace chamber blazed with fiery light. And there he was, the intruder, a hooded figure crouched before the furnace, feeding coal from his satchel into the flames. His movements were quick, practiced, as though he had done this countless times. The fire roared in response, belching sparks through the pipes into the night. Whitcomb whispered, "This is no madman. Look, he knows exactly how to control it." Thomas narrowed his eyes. "Let's see if he can answer for it." He stepped forward, sword drawn, his voice cutting through the roar of the furnace. "Enough. Stand where you are." The figure froze. Slowly, he turned, the firelight casting his face in shadow beneath the hood. For a moment, the only sound was the furnace's hiss. Then, without warning, the intruder hurled a scoop of burning coal toward them. Sparks exploded, forcing Thomas and Whitcomb to shield their faces. By the time they recovered, the figure had darted through a hidden door behind the furnace. The pursuers and Whitcomb gave chase, plunging into the narrow passage. The walls closed around them, damp and suffocating, their lanterns' glow barely cutting the darkness. The intruder's footsteps echoed ahead, sometimes close, sometimes distant, as though the very walls were playing tricks. The passage twisted downward, leading them into chambers half forgotten. They glimpsed remnants of old experiments, rusted cages, broken glass, strange carvings scorched into stone. The intruder seemed to know the way intimately, darting through side corridors and slipping always just beyond reach. Then, suddenly, they lost him. The echoes ceased. The passage ahead split into three, each vanishing into shadow. Whitcomb gasped for breath. "He's gone. We've lost him." Thomas held the lantern high, scanning the walls. "No, he's here, watching, waiting." Clara's discovery. Meanwhile, in the great hall, Clara paced nervously. The storm howled outside. The firelight flickered, and every creak of the castle made her heart race. Then she noticed it movement in the courtyard. She hurried to the window, pressing her face to the glass. There, illuminated by lightning, she saw the hooded figure dart across the stones toward the southern tower. He moved swiftly, clutching something heavy beneath his cloak. Clara's breath caught. He's not in the passages, he's out there. Without waiting, she snatched a lantern and ran to warn the others. The confrontationth group converged in the courtyard, rain lashing their faces, thunder shaking the sky. The intruder was already climbing the southern tower, vanishing inside. Together they followed, ascending the spiral staircase slick with damp dot at the top. They found him again, this time not tending a furnace, but pouring a dark liquid from a flask into the pipes. The stench was sharp, chemical. Whitcomb's eyes widened. Oil, accelerant. He means to increase the fire's fury. Thomas raised his sword. No more running. The intruder spun, his hood slipping back in the lantern light. For the first time, they saw his face, a gaunt man with hollow eyes, his skin lined with age and soot. "I protect what is mine," he hissed. "This castle breathes because I will it. It is my duty, my legacy." Clara whispered in horror. "He's mad." The man laughed, wild and bitter. "The world fears fire, and so long as they fear this place, no one will take it from me." He reached for the furnace lever, but Thomas lunged, grappling with him. The two men struggled, the chamber filling with smoke and heat. Sparks rained as the furnace roared, flames licking dangerously close to the ceiling. Finally, with Whitcomb's aid, Thomas wrenched the lever away. The intruder collapsed, coughing, his strength broken. The fire subsided slightly, though the furnace still burned hot. Thomas held the lantern to the man's face. "Who are you?" The intruder spat black and phlegm. "The last of Blackthorn's blood. This castle is my birthright, and if it must live through fire, so be it." The escape for they could press further. The tower shook violently. The furnace groaned under the strain of the tampered pipes, metal screeching. Whitcomb shouted, "It's unstable. If it explodes, the whole tower could fall." They had no choice. Dragging the weakened intruder with them, they fled down the stairwell as the furnace roared behind. Flames burst from the pipes, lighting the night sky brighter than ever before. Villagers miles away would see the blaze and whisper of dragons once more. When they reached the safety of the hall, the intruder slumped unconscious at their feet. The storm outside abated, the fire slowly dying down, but the truth had only grown darker. The castle's fire was no curse, it was a weapon, and now they knew the man who kept it alive. A broken heir determined to guard his secret at all costs. Chapter 5. The truth revealed had storm past, but the echoes of thunder seemed to linger in the stones of Blackthorn Castle. Dawn bled slowly across the horizon, pale light falling upon the travellers gathered in the great hall. The hooded intruder lay bound to a chair, his gaunt face streaked with soot, his eyes burning with defiance despite his weakened body. The castle, for the moment, was silent. No furnaces roared, no fire breathed from its towers. Yet the memory of the night's inferno still glowed in their minds. Thomas Hargreaves stood before the captive, arms folded. "No more running, no more smoke and shadows. You will answer us now." The man coughed, his voice rasping from smoke. "Answer, you have already seen the truth. Blackthorn breathes fire, as it has for centuries, and it is mine to tend." Mr. Whitcomb adjusted his spectacles, his scholar's curiosity warring with his anger. "Not truth illusion. We found the furnaces, the pipes, the chemical oils. All this time, you've fed the legend, so the villagers would stay away. But why? What secret is worth such madness?" The intruder's eyes gleamed. "You call it madness. I call it survival. My ancestors built this fire to protect the castle, to make its name feared. Enemies thought dragons lived within these walls, and so they kept their distance. Without fear, Blackthorn would have fallen long ago." Clara's voice trembled as she stepped closer. "But there are no enemies now, only villagers, and travellers like us. You've kept the legend alive only to frighten the innocent." The man's expression twisted, equal parts pride and pain. "Yes, because if they believed the fire was gone, they would take it from me. The estate, the castle, my birthright. Fear is the only shield I have left. The legacy of Alaric Whitcomb paced, his mind racing. Then you are descended from Lord Alaric himself, the same who commanded his artificers to build the fire-breathing towers. The man lifted his chin. I am his blood, the last heir. The castle is my flesh, my duty. Without me, it is nothing but ruin. Thomas shook his head. No, without you, it might have peace. Instead, you've chained yourself to a ghost, burning the nights away to keep a lie alive. The captive's eyes flashed with sudden rage. You do not understand. The fire is not a lie, it is power. As long as it burns, Blackthorn lives. The hidden chamber determined to find full proof of his words. Thomas demanded the map. Reluctantly, Whitcomb spread it on the table. There is one chamber we have not searched, he said softly. Beneath the southern tower. If there is any final secret, it lies there, dragging the intruder with them. They descended into the lower passages. The air grew damp, the stones slick with moss. The tunnels twisted like veins beneath the castle, until at last they reached a heavy iron door sealed with ancient locks. The captive gave a hollow laugh. You wish to see what Alaric left behind? Then open it, and you will understand why the fire must never die. With effort, Thomas forced the door open. The stench of ash and oil rolled out. Inside lay a vast chamber, lined with furnaces, greater than any they had seen. Pipes snaked through the walls, leading upward to the towers. Strange mechanisms lay half-broken bellows, gears, vats of chemicals, and upon the far wall, carved deep into the stone, were words in Latin. Here lies the dragon of Blackthorn, forged by man's hand. May his breath burn until time itself ends. Clara's breath caught. So it was all deliberate. A machine dragon. A weapon. Whitcomb whispered in awe. Lord Alaric wanted the world to believe he commanded a beast of fire. He built this labyrinth of furnaces to make legend live. The heir's confession, the intruder's voice rang through the chamber, bitter yet proud. Now you see, without me, the dragon sleeps. With me, it lives. I am the keeper of Blackthorn's fire. Thomas turned sharply. And how many have you frightened? How many driven away to protect this illusion? You claim legacy, but what of honor? The heir's shoulder sagged. For the first time, his voice wavered. I have nothing else. No lands, no wealth, only fire. It is all that remains of my bloodline. Clara's eyes softened with pity. Then let it go. Let the castle rest. You are its prisoner, not its master. He shook his head violently. Never. If the fire dies, so does Blackthorn.